The Grand Orrery of Worlds, the heart of the Galactic Council, was a chamber designed to humble empires. It was not built of mere matter, but of captured starlight and solidified gravitational fields. Nebulae swirled in slow, majestic currents within its crystalline walls, and the light of a billion suns, piped in through dimensional conduits, cast long, shifting shadows from the floating obsidian daises where the council members sat. At its center, a perfect sphere of void hung suspended, a miniature black hole tamed and rendered inert, its purpose to absorb all sound that was not intentional, all heat that was not born of debate. Silence in the orrery was therefore an absolute and profound thing, a presence in itself. It was this silence that now pressed down upon High Counselor Xylos of the Cathar, a weight heavier than the gravity of his homeworld. His crystalline body, a lattice of intricate, glowing filaments, pulsed with a slow, anxious rhythm, a pattern of light that his translator drone converted into a sigh for the benefit of the other, more organic species present. Before them, a vast holographic projection dominated the central space, a three-dimensional map of the galaxy's trailing arm. A creeping, corrupted stain marred its perfection, a patch of mottled, shifting darkness that was expanding with an inexorable, terrifying slowness. They called it the chittering veil, for the sound it made in the quantum foam, a constant, static-like hiss that was the sound of reality being unmade. It was not a fleet, not an empire, not a biological plague. It was a swarm of self-replicating, non-baryonic entities that consumed everything, matter, energy, light, even thought, and converted it into more of itself. Where it passed, it left nothing but absolute sterile void. Entire star systems had vanished, their light simply ceasing to be, their gravitational echoes fading into nothingness. The G-Vorn hegemony, a race of proud, silicon-based warriors whose fleets had shattered neutron stars for sport, had sent their grand armada to confront it. The projection had shown their mighty warships, each the size of a small moon, firing lances of pure energy that could crack a planet's core. The veil had simply absorbed them. Then, in a moment of chilling silence, the Armada's own energy signatures had winked out, one by one, like candles being snuffed in a final, eternal wind. The G-Vorn were broken, their spirit shattered alongside their fleet, their representative, Grand Marshal Vorlag, now a statue of hulking, silent fury on his dais. The veil's trajectory remains unchanged, a synthesized voice announced, emanating from the Lumina Concord's representative, a being of pure, shimmering energy contained within a shimmering force field. Its vector is constant. It does not deviate. It does not react. It simply consumes. Vorlag's massive form stirred, his voice a low growl of grinding stone. It is a blight, a mindless plague. We underestimated its resilience. A new strategy is required. We must concentrate the firepower of every member species. We will create a firebreak. We will burn a swath of this galaxy to its constituent atoms if we must, but we will halt this tide of nothingness. Xylos felt a dissonant chord resonate through his crystalline structure. The G-Vorn's solution was always fire, always force. It was the only way they knew. And what of the worlds within this? Firebreak, Grand Marshal, Xylos projected, his translated voice calm and measured. There are dozens of precontact civilizations, burgeoning ecosystems, and several nascent sentient species along the proposed corridor. They are an acceptable loss, Vorlag boomed, his rocky fists clenching. Their sacrifice will save trillions. The calculus of survival is often brutal, Counselor. It is a lesson your people, with your histories and your philosophies, seem to have forgotten in your long peace. The debate raged, a familiar storm of ideologies. The pragmatists, led by the G-Vorn, argued for brutal necessity. The idealists, a fractured minority, pleaded for other solutions, though they had none to offer. Xylos remained a fulcrum of logic, listening, processing, his internal thoughts a silent cascade of historical precedents and strategic analyses. He had seen this before, a dozen times in his long life. A new threat, an old fear, and the same predictable fracturing of unity. But this threat was different. It did not negotiate. It did not have a leader to assassinate or a homeworld to threaten. It was entropy given a terrifying, mobile form. Then the projection shifted, zooming in on a small, unremarkable sector directly in the veil's path. A single yellow star, orbited by a handful of rocky and gaseous planets. Sector 001, as designated by the Council's automated charting systems. The homeworld of a species that had only achieved interstellar travel a few centuries prior, a blink of an eye in galactic terms. They called themselves humans. There is another issue, the Lumina Concord's voice echoed, soft yet commanding. The nascent Terran Republic, Their core worlds, including their system of origin, lie directly in the path of the veil. According to our most conservative projections, they have less than one standard cycle before contact. A heavy silence fell once more. The implications were clear. Humanity was the buffer. Whether by design or by cosmic chance, their small territory was a temporary shield for the systems beyond. Vorlag's stony features showed no trace of pity. They are a non-signatory, fledgling power. Their military capacity is negligible. They possess a small fleet of primitive kinetic and directed energy vessels. They cannot stop the veil. They cannot even slow it. They will be consumed. It is regrettable, added a slithering, multi-tongued diplomat from the Cygnian ascendancy, its voice a wet hiss. But their end will grant us precious time, time to muster our forces for the firebreak, time to prepare our defenses. Xylos felt a tremor of something cold and unpleasant run through his being, a feeling akin to the organic concept of disgust. He had studied the humans. They were a perplexing species, violent, emotional, prone to catastrophic internal conflicts, yet also capable of breathtaking acts of creation, empathy, and self-sacrifice. Their art was filled with a profound and aching beauty, their philosophies a chaotic but brilliant tapestry of hope and despair. They were a paradox, a species of brilliant monsters and gentle gods, all contained within fragile shells of carbon and water. They were so young, so full of unshaped potential. To simply allow them to be extinguished as a matter of strategic convenience felt like a crime against the very concept of life. "We have a moral obligation to warn them," Xylos stated, his voice ringing with a clarity that cut through the chamber's gloom. "Council Protocol 7 Gamma is explicit. In the face of a non-sentient existential threat, all known sentient species within the affected region must be alerted, regardless of their political status." Vorlag let out a short, sharp bark that might have been a laugh. "Protocol? The G-Vorn hegemony has just lost its entire armada, the pride of the galaxy, and you speak to me of protocol for a species of primitives who still burn hydrocarbons for warmth on some of their colony worlds. Their warning will accomplish nothing but to spread panic among them in their final moments. Let them die in ignorance. It is the kinder fate." "Kindness is not the issue, Grand Marshal," Xylos countered, his light patterns sharpening. "Information is a right. The right to face one's own end with knowledge and dignity is the bedrock upon which this council was founded. To deny them, that is to become as mindless and destructive as the veil itself." His words hung in the air, a challenge that few dared to meet. The lumina conquered shimmered in agreement. "Councillor Xylos is correct. The law must be upheld. It is what separates us from the savagery of the void." Reluctantly, the council agreed. A message would be sent. A standard formal warning containing all the Council's data on the veil, its composition, its velocity, its horrifying effectiveness against the G-Vorn fleet. It was a message of doom, a final courtesy offered to a doomed race. As the communications officer prepared the transmission, Xylos watched the holographic representation of the small human sector, a tiny island of light about to be swallowed by an endless sea of darkness. He felt a profound sense of failure. They were the galaxy's shepherds, its protectors, and in this moment they were doing nothing but bearing witness to an execution, offering the condemned a final, hollow prayer. The transmission was sent, a pulse of information on a carrier wave, shot across the light years into the silent, waiting dark. The Council then turned its attention back to the grim logistics of the firebreak, the debate over which worlds to sacrifice already beginning anew. The fate of humanity was a footnote, a minor detail in a far grander, far more terrible equation. They had been warned. Nothing more could be done. The response from the humans did not come for some time. In the orrery, time stretched and compressed, measured in the slow drift of the veil across the star map. The Council's best minds, its most powerful strategic engines, worked furiously, modeling simulations, calculating energy yields, drawing and redrawing the lines of galactic annihilation. Every model came back with the same grim conclusion. The firebreak was a desperate, ruinously costly gamble with a low probability of success. The veil didn't just consume matter, it consumed the energy directed at it, growing stronger with every failed attack. Fear, a rare and corrosive element in these halls of power, began to crystallize. The G-Vorn's bluster faded into sullen silence. The Cygnians' hissed platitudes turned to nervous whispers. The Lumina Concord's light seemed to dim, its usual steady glow flickering with uncertainty. It was in this atmosphere of rising despair that the human signal was received. It was not a plea for help. It was not a cry of terror or a demand for asylum. It was a simple, formal request for a direct, secure audiovisual channel with the council leadership. The request itself was unusual in its composure, its lack of panic. Intrigued and slightly unsettled, the council granted it. Central holoprojector shifted, the star map dissolving to be replaced by a new image. It was not the opulent bridge of a G-Vorn dreadnought or the ethereal energyscape of a Lumina vessel. The image was of a stark, utilitarian room, all muted grays and functional, unadorned consoles. Seated in a simple chair was a single human female. She was of middle age, her dark hair streaked with silver and pulled back severely from a face that was calm, etched with lines of experience rather than fear. She wore a simple, dark blue uniform with minimal insignia. A small, text-based identifier appeared at the bottom of the projection. Admiral Eva Rostova, Terran Defense Fleet, UNS Aegis. She did not speak immediately, her gray eyes sweeping across the assembled council members, taking in the grand, intimidating spectacle of the orrery and its occupants. There was no awe in her gaze, no fear, only a quiet, analytical appraisal. Xylos, as the one who had championed their right to be warned, felt it was his duty to speak first. Admiral Rostova, I am High Counselor Xylos. On behalf of the Galactic Council, we offer our deepest condolences for the fate that is about to befall your people. We have transmitted all our data on the approaching threat. Admiral Rostova inclined her head slightly, a gesture of acknowledgement. Her voice, when she spoke, was as composed as her expression, clear and without inflection. We received your data packet, Counselor. We thank you for the warning. We have cross-referenced it with our own sensor readings. Your assessment of the Veil's capabilities is accurate. The sheer, unadulterated calm of her words was unnerving. It was the calm of a physician discussing a terminal diagnosis, not the patient receiving it. Vorlag, his patience worn thin, lumbered forward on his dais. Your gratitude is noted, Admiral, but your time is short. The Council has no resources to spare for an evacuation. We advise your people to make whatever peace they can. Rostova's eyes shifted to the hulking G-Vorn. For the first time, a flicker of something registered in her expression, not fear but a cool, almost dismissive assessment. Peace is not our objective at this moment, Grand Marshal. Survival is. We are aware you have no aid to offer. We are not requesting any. A murmur went through the orrery. What was this? Arrogance? Ignorance? A species-wide madness brought on by the prospect of extinction. Then what is the purpose of this communication? The Cygnian diplomat hissed. To posture in the face of your annihilation, it is a pointless gesture. The purpose of this communication is to inform the Galactic Council of our intended course of action, Rostova stated, her voice cutting through the rising tension. So that you do not misinterpret what you are about to witness. The Terran Republic will now engage its own defensive protocols to safeguard the Sol system. Vorlag let out a genuine, rumbling laugh of disbelief this time. Your defensive protocols? Admiral, with all due respect to a fellow military commander, your fleet consists of a handful of cruisers and destroyers. Their kinetic slugs and plasma cannons will be less than gnats against a storm. We sent the most powerful armada in galactic history, and it was erased in minutes. What can your pathetic little navy possibly hope to accomplish? Admiral Rostova's gaze remained fixed on the G-Vorn. The silence stretched, thick and heavy. She did not raise her voice. She did not need to. Her next words fell into the orrery with the weight of collapsed stars. Your strategy, Grand Marshal, was based on a flawed premise. You assumed the Veil was an enemy to be fought, an object to be destroyed with overwhelming force. She paused, letting the implication sink in. You treated a contagion as if it were an army. You fed the fire, hoping to extinguish it. We will not be making the same mistake. Our approach is not one of aggression. We will not be fighting the Veil. Xylos felt a strange resonance within his crystalline form, a flicker of something his logical mind could not immediately place. It felt like hope, or perhaps something far more terrifying. What are you suggesting, Admiral? He asked, his voice steady. The Terran Republic hereby invokes the last line protocol, Rostova announced, her tone becoming formal as if she were reading from a sacred text. All non-essential civilian and military assets have been recalled to a secure perimeter. We have established a cordon at the heliopause of our system. We will not attack the Veil. We will unmake it. Unmake it? The Lumina's voice pulsed, laced with confusion. That is a semantic distinction without meaning. How can one unmake something without destroying it? A look of profound, ancient weariness crossed Rostova's face, a deep, sorrowful weight that seemed to age her 1,000 years in a single instant. You are an old and wise species. You have seen the rise and fall of empires, but you have never seen a species so terrified of its own capacity for violence that it turned its greatest weapon inward. You developed weapons to conquer the stars. We developed weapons to conquer ourselves. She took a slow breath. The system we are about to engage is not a weapon in the way you understand it. It does not fire. It does not explode. It is a state of being, a bubble of causal integrity. We call it the Aegis. The holoprojector split its focus. One side still showed the Admiral's impassive face. The other returned to the star map, zoomed in on the Sol system. A few dozen faint blue lights blinked into existence, arranging themselves in a wide, spherical shell around the distant yellow star. This was the Terran Defense Fleet. To the assembled council, it was a pitiful sight, a child's handful of pebbles arranged against a tidal wave. The chittering veil, a vast, galaxy-spanning cloud of utter blackness, was now touching the very edge of that system. The council watched, a collection of ancient, powerful beings, holding their collective breath as a species they had written off as insignificant, prepared to face cosmic oblivion. The Aegis is now active, Rostova said, her voice a near whisper, yet it echoed through the vast, silent chamber. On the tactical display, nothing happened. There were no energy spikes, no weapon discharges, no brilliant flashes of light. The small human ships simply held their position. Then, as the leading edge of the chittering veil, a tendril of absolute nothingness a light year across, touched the line demarcated by the human ships, the impossible occurred. It did not explode. It did not recoil. It did not shatter. The veil simply stopped. Where the crawling blackness met the invisible perimeter of the Aegis, it ceased to exist, not in a violent reaction, but in a silent, seamless erasure. It was as if a painter were wiping a brushstroke of black paint off a canvas, leaving behind the clean, star-dusted background that had been there before. The veil continued to press forward, a relentless tide of cosmic horror, and it continued to be unwritten from reality at the precise boundary of the Aegis field. A perfect, unwavering line was being held against infinity. A river of non-existence was flowing into a hole in the universe and vanishing without a trace. In the grand orrery, there was a silence more profound than any that had come before. It was not the silence of decorum or tension. It was the silence of absolute soul-shaking shock. Vorlag, the proud Grand Marshal of the G-Vorn, was on his feet, his massive form trembling, his stony jaw slack. The Cygnian diplomat had recoiled, its many tongues frozen mid-hiss. The Lumina Concord's energy form was fluctuating wildly, a storm of brilliant, chaotic colors. Xylos stared, his crystalline mind struggling to process the sensory data. His species understood physics on a level few could match. They could manipulate gravity, fold spacetime, and observe the quantum flux of the universe. What he was seeing was not physics. It was a violation. It was a refutation of the fundamental laws of cause and effect. The veil's existence was being actively, surgically, and completely nullified at a conceptual level. It was not being blocked or destroyed. It was being rendered untrue. He turned his attention back to the image of the human admiral. Eva Rostova had her eyes closed. A single tear traced a path down her cheek. It was not a tear of joy or of relief. It was a tear of immense, soul-crushing sorrow. She looked like a priestess forced to perform a terrible, necessary, and unholy ritual. When she opened her eyes again, they were fixed on Xylos. She knew he would be the one to understand, or at least the one to ask the right question. He found his voice, the translator drone mimicking the tremor he felt in his own resonant frequency. "Admiral, what is this power? What have you done?" Rostova's expression was grim, a mask of pained resolve. "I have invoked our ultimate deterrent, Counselor, a technology born from our darkest age. During a period of our history we call the ideological wars, we came to a precipice. Our capacity for destruction had finally outstripped our wisdom. We created weapons that could shatter worlds, poison suns, and unravel the fabric of genetics. We were on the verge of self-annihilation, trapped in a spiral of mutually assured destruction." She looked away from the camera for a moment, as if gazing into a past too terrible to fully behold. "We realized that the only way to win was not to build a better weapon, but to create a perfect defense. An answer so absolute that it would make all offense obsolete. So our best minds, our greatest thinkers, they did not turn their gaze to the stars, but inward, to the very nature of reality. They learned that the universe, at its most fundamental level, is information. A string of causal events, and information can be edited. The full, horrifying, awe-inspiring truth began to dawn on Xylos. The Aegis was not a shield, it was a sensor. The Aegis Protocol, Rostova continued, her voice low and heavy with the weight of her words, does not project a field of energy. It projects a localized, self-contained paradox. Within its boundary, it enforces a single immutable law. The state of the Sol system shall not be altered by hostile external action. It is a conceptual statement, given the force of physical law. When the veil enters the field, its own causal chain, its existence, its directive to consume, comes into conflict with that absolute law. The universe, which cannot abide a paradox, resolves it by deleting the offending element. The veil is not destroyed. It is retroactively determined to have never arrived. The chamber was a tomb. The counselors, beings who commanded fleets that could level star systems, were like children listening to a ghost story, a tale of a power so profound it bordered on theological. They had built their empires on the principles of force, energy, and matter. The humans, this young, volatile, underestimated race, had bypassed all of it. They had weaponized metaphysics. Why? Vorlag managed to stammer, his arrogance completely stripped away, leaving only raw, naked disbelief. Why would you create such a thing? Such power could make you gods. You could erase our fleets, our worlds, our entire history with a thought. Rostova's gaze was hard as diamond. That is precisely why we have never used it. It was created as the ultimate deterrent against ourselves. The moment we turned it outward to conquer, to destroy, we would become the very thing we sought to escape. The Aegis is our shame, Grand Marshal. It is the monument to our own capacity for evil, a constant reminder of the abyss we pulled ourselves back from. We keep its existence a secret not out of strategic advantage, but out of a profound and terrible guilt. Its use is a sign of our greatest failure, the failure to find another way. Every moment it remains active, it sickens our souls. The scale of it was beyond comprehension. The Council had judged humanity on its small fleet and its limited territorial reach. They had measured them by the yardstick of conventional power, of ships and weapons and resources. They had been looking at the spear and had failed to see the god holding it. Humanity's true military power was not in its fleet. Its military power was a philosophical and technological finality, a line drawn in the fabric of spacetime that said, simply, no. And their last line of defense was not a wall of ships. It was their own moral restraint, the will not to use their ultimate power. The tactical display showed the chittering veil continuing its futile assault on the Aegis. It was a mindless, cosmic engine of destruction, and it was being effortlessly unwritten from existence, moment by moment. The process would take time, but the outcome was no longer in doubt. The Sol system was a perfect sanctuary, an island of absolute reality in a sea of encroaching chaos. Humanity had saved itself. And in doing so, they had revealed themselves to be, perhaps, the most terrifyingly powerful civilization the galaxy had ever known. Xylos looked at the image of the human admiral, at her sad, resolute face, and he understood. The Council was not prepared for Earth's military power because they had been looking for a sword, and had found a soul that had mastered the art of saying no to its own demons. A soul that had, out of necessity, learned how to command reality itself. The fear he now felt was of a different sort. It was not the fear of an enemy, but the profound, humbling, and terrifying awe one feels in the presence of the divine. The hours that followed were a surreal vigil. The members of the Galactic Council remained on their daises, silent and motionless, their attention locked on the holographic display. They watched as the chittering veil, the unstoppable force that had shattered the G-Vorn hegemony and brought the galaxy to its knees, was systematically and silently erased. It was like watching a wound heal in reverse, the corrupted flesh of spacetime knitting itself back together, leaving clean, unblemished darkness dotted with the familiar light of distant stars. There was no sound, no spectacle, just a slow, inexorable cleansing. The process was hypnotizing in its quiet finality. It was the ultimate expression of power, not a violent explosion, but a perfect, silent negation. During this long watch, Xylos's mind raced, recontextualizing everything he thought he knew about the humans. Their chaotic history, their violent internal struggles, their rapid, almost frantic technological advancement, it all made a new kind of sense. They were not a species struggling with primitive aggression. They were a species locked in a desperate race against their own nature. They had discovered the ultimate weapon early in their development, a fire stolen not from the gods, but from the very rulebook of the universe. Their entire subsequent history, their philosophies of ethics and morality, their complex and often contradictory political structures, were all desperate, elaborate containment systems. They were not designed to manage their relationships with other species. but to manage the relationship between their intellect and their impulses. They were like a race of sleeping giants who had to invent a culture of profound stillness, lest they roll over and crush the world in their sleep. He communicated this in a low, resonant hum to the Lumina Concord, a private channel of shared light and thought. The Concord's response was a wave of somber, violet light. We saw them as children playing with fire. We did not realize they had already tamed a star and were living in quiet terror of its heat. Admiral Rostova remained on screen, her vigil matching their own. She answered their questions with a stark, unembellished honesty that was more disarming than any political maneuvering. She explained that the Aegis field required a colossal amount of energy, channeled from their star itself, but the true cost was not in power, but in focus. The field was maintained by a network of quantum-entangled consciousnesses, a core of human minds trained to a state of meditative purity, holding the conceptual integrity of the field in place. A single hateful or aggressive thought from one of them could cause the paradox to collapse with catastrophic consequences. The pilots of the Aegis fleet were not warriors, they were monks. Humanity's ultimate defense was powered not by reactors, but by discipline, by serenity. This revelation sent another shockwave through the Council. They had always assumed that advanced civilizations inevitably evolved beyond the messy, inefficient limitations of organic consciousness. They sought ascension into pure energy, like the Lumina, or digital immortality, or the cold logic of crystalline computation, like the Cathar. The humans had taken the opposite path. They had embraced their flawed, emotional, organic minds and had refined them into tools of unimaginable power and control. They had turned their greatest weakness, their volatile emotions, into their greatest strength. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, the last wisps of the chittering veil dissolved against the Aegis boundary. The tactical map was clear. The creeping stain of darkness was gone. Where a non-baryonic tide of annihilation had been, there were now only stars. A collective sigh of relief, translated in a dozen different ways, a gust of cooled air, a gentle chime, a deep rumble, filled the orrery. Rostova's shoulders slumped, the iron control she had maintained for hours finally giving way to a profound exhaustion. "The Aegis protocol is being decommissioned," she reported, her voice raspy. "The threat is neutralized, the system is secure." "You have our gratitude, Admiral," Xylos projected, his voice infused with a sincere humility he had not felt in centuries. "You have saved not only your own people, but countless worlds that lay behind you. You have done what the combined might of this council could not." Vorlag the G-Vorn stepped forward. His massive form seemed smaller, his usual bluster gone, replaced by a deep, resonant respect. "Admiral Rostova, I was wrong. We misjudged you. We saw a fledgling race and offered only scorn, but you have shown us there are other kinds of strength. The G-Vorn hegemony is in your debt." It was a moment of unprecedented unity, born from shared terror and newfound respect. The old hierarchies of the Council, the posturing and the pride, had been burned away by the revelation of humanity's quiet, terrifying power. They were no longer a minor, upstart race. They were a civilization of a different order, a pillar of stability whose true strength was rooted in their mastery of self. But the universe, Xylos knew, was rarely so simple. The story was never truly over. As Rostova began the formal sign-off, a proximity ale,